everybody. Welcome to another episode of Sales Chatter Data Day, Wednesday. One of the best days of the week because we get to intersect data with sales, data with relationships. And today is going to be no different. We have got the amazing Dean Crook with us that's just finishing up a little typing, finishing up a little email or something going on here. And we've also got Jeff Dickinson, the audacious cowboy, reading the Progressive Railroad, and it's actually right side up this time, which is good. And we've got a dear friend of mine, Tyler Sutherland, the vision manager for U.S. Traffic, and we are going to talk data. We are going to talk the intersection of data and relationships, data and sales. Gentlemen, good morning. How are we all today?
Audaciously happy.
Audaciously happy. He's geographicality bodaciously. That's great. Diener, how you doing, brother?
Yeah, good. Winding down to next Tuesday. Trying to stay healthy for the knee replacement surgery.
Yes.
Cool,
yes,
that's nice.
Yes.
Going through all the pre-surgery treatment, like MRSA treatments in your nose, like all this stuff you got to do before surgery these days. It's I've got a long list.
So when you're done, it's going to be I could lift that, I could push that. Yeah,
it'll be like the ad of Arnold, where he said we pick things up, we put things down. That's kind of how I think about logistics. That's what we do.
Yes. Yeah. Tyler, how are you, brother?
Doing well.
I had a little show.
Yeah, just had a little screaming baby teething upstairs. So I asked my wife, what can we do about this? I got a canvas coming up. So she said, Daddy's throwing us out.
Yeah, that's it. But you know what? That's part of post-COVID work relationships. So it's all good. So yeah, let's hit it, my friends.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
Good way to chew up an hour is just keep putting little video clips out. You know what I'm saying? See, there we go. We got a dog going crazy because the wind's blowing the wrong way. So it's all good. Dean, my man, take it away.
Yeah, interesting week. Kind of sort of the dog days of summer is how I describe it. That feeling. It's sort of in between all of the sporting seasons and for me, the Tour de France that starts at the start of July. But there's kind of not a lot going on in the sporting world once you get past the NBA finals and the Stanley Cup last night. So it's sort of we're into that period.
Hold on, you're forgetting about one of the greatest feats
Canadian history.
Something year history of
the golf. Yeah, the golf on Sunday.
Canadian Open for the first time, 71-foot putt to beat a 69-year drought of a Canadian. Yeah. Was that putt not the greatest ever? I mean, I heard the ground shake an hour and a half from the golf course. Like it was crazy that putt.
Dad, what about all the clutch putts to get there? Like in the previous 4 or 5 playoffs, that was some good golf. The funniest part, I know it was too funny, but the security guard tackling one of his friends.
Hadwin. Yeah, I think one of the biggest feats of that too was actually the triumphant comeback. I didn't see Nick Taylor coming back from how far back he was. That was amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, that
it was you got to kind of twofold on that, right? Like Adam Hadwin must have been like, geez, does nobody know what I look like? Like, nobody's tackling Mike Weir. He's rushing the green as well. Poor Adam. But I had the pleasure of following Adam one year at the Canadian Open. He's a great guy. But imagine that, eh? Tackled by security, and then afterwards, security's like, "Oh man, we're all sorry, everybody in there." Like, yeah. Sorry, I wasn't. Great security after the win. Yes, exactly. Lisa says, Tyler, totally understand what you're going through with the teething baby. Got it. Yeah. So I mean, this week we had, obviously, last night though, as much as I'm happy for Vegas because the owner of Vegas actually called in the finals in 3 years and Cup in 6. He called it in 2017, and Vegas actually won the Cup in 6 years. So he's like, this profit kind of thing. So I'm happy Vegas won, but what was it, like ended up 9-3 or something? Like it was just those types of games to me are like, I was watching the third period and it's like 12 minutes and 50 seconds. And I'm like, just call it. Like, you ever that when you have kids and they're playing sport and they're losing so bad, it's just like run the clock. Just as a coach, you're like, no, just run the clock. Just get me out of this nightmare. And it's, but anyways, congratulations to Vegas. I couldn't even imagine the party that's going to be happening in that city. Oh, man.
Yeah, Dan, the only reason why they have to play the whole game is because of the sponsorships. They've got to get their airtime.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I mean, there was no way. I mean, you think it
like that? No.
Yeah, Aiden Hill, you're not putting 7 goals by him on a Stanley Cup final game. Like you're just not. It's not happening. And that glove save that he made out of nowhere through like literally a 4-inch triangle between, like, I mean, just spectacular. So some of it was spectacular. You'd like to see like a 2-1 game or something where there's like, massive crunches and back and forth. But you know what? Now we got the NBA finals and then that's it. Then we go to, what do we go to? Sitting by the pool, relaxing.
Baseball.
What is baseball? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Baseball. Yeah. I mean, people love baseball. Obviously, I think it's, besides soccer, the highest paid sports athletes in the world is baseball. But anyways, that's data. That's data for sports chatter. Now back to sales chatter. What is going on in the world of logistics?
So I'll try not to trigger any more segues to related topics, but we're kind of the market has sort of really lacks momentum. We've talked about lack of demand for a little while. There are some pockets where there's lots of demand, like flatbed rates in Oregon are at the highest level they've ever been. No clue why. It's just outbound spot rates for flatbed carriers in that big flatbed market around Medford. They grow a hell of a lot of weed there too, but they also grow a lot of lumber, and a lot of truckers haul a lot of lumber out of there. So not sure what's going on there. There's some pockets where there's a lot of activity, but on my show yesterday, we talked about flatbed and dry van rates sort of treading water. They kind of up and down a little bit over the course of the week, nothing meaningful. Flatbed did drop back at the national level to its long-term average. It's been sitting at about $2.17 a mile, excluding fuel, for most of this year. So flatbed's kind of literally flat. Reefer rates are up a penny per mile. Flatbed reefer volumes in the produce market are down about 4% year over year. So it's still lagging. And on our show about a month ago, we talked about, between mid-April and July 4, reefer rates normally go up about 29 cents a mile and peak at July 4 and then drop right off. Our short-term forecast that includes July 4 now has got rates only going up about 10 cents a mile. So it doesn't, but last year it was 2 cents. So volumes are lagging last year. Last year it was kind of like a speed bump peak season. This year it'll be a little bit more of a hill, but it won't be the peak by the look of the forecast that we normally see, which doesn't bode well for, the market. But it does fit what we've been talking about with the market is it's going to be pretty flat most of the year, right? There's not a lot of demand catalysts that are going to turn the market. What will turn the market is carriers exiting the industry, which they still are, albeit at a slowing rate, decreasing rate. So that's the spot market. Dry van contract rates in all of our TMS systems, we look at the average, still coming down about 1% every 2 weeks. Replacement rates based on prior RFPs coming in down around 9%, 9 to 12% consistently every 2 weeks. So they're dropping. Last week we talked about why it's important to follow spot. Contract rates will follow spot in about 4 to 6 months. So that kind of takes us into the fall, which is when we think the market will tighten and volumes start to increase. That kind of leads us over to why, which is sort of leading into peak retail season. May imports came out on Monday. They were up 3% month over month. Again,
that's huge.
They were up 16% month over month in April, which was the catch-up, pent-up demand from Chinese New Year slowdown. And then, they kind of surged in April, a little bit more than usual, and then they taper off in May, and then they kind of get going over the summer. So no surprise that they're only up 3% month over month. But there's some of the data points around the market show that there's a little bit of there's still more volume coming into the West Coast. It's freight rates and intermodal rates are really cheap off the West Coast right now. So I could see some shippers saying, we've got drought problems on the Panama Canal. We can't automatically send high volumes of containers through the Panama to the Gulf Coast. maybe we stick with the West Coast. But of course, they would have routed all of those containers coming in May before the slowdown and strike action.
Yeah.
So we may see some change in sort of diversion of discretionary income. The port situation, I counted the number of containers last night. Last week we had around 14 container ships potentially delayed. By the end of the week, it was down to 3. So there are only 3 large container ships delayed in terms of getting a berth to unload in Los Angeles. Remember, January 9 last year, it was 109 container ships backed up. So we're nowhere near where it was. But what's transpired in the last 2 or 3 days is that's now up to 17. And it's about 50-50 between ships trying to get off the dock that are unloaded and ships trying to come in to unload. So there's some vessel bunching going on around Los Angeles, Long Beach, yes, which is alarming. Port of Seattle closed down over the weekend. Lots of unrest, lots of labour shortages, shortage of lashes to make fast the vessels alongside. Of course, we've got a lot of discontent. I think they're voting this week. The Teamsters are voting this week about strike action in the UPS labour agreement. It's kind of the largest labour contract in the country. 350,000 Teamsters work for the UPS. I think they're all Teamsters, but they're voting this week to approve strike action before you get to the actual having a strike. So lots of labour unrest right now that's sort of percolating under the surface. Flat volumes are kind of mediocre. Spot rates have definitely bottomed out, though. They are certainly looking at increasing. Diesel prices are coming down. Carriers have got some runway to keep going. They're still not making a lot of money when you look at the average carrier. They are struggling to get by. I'm not going into a lot of detail on that purposely, but because I just wanted to wrap up quickly with my market summary, Dan. But some data came out yesterday that is kind of somewhat encouraging. You know how we talked about produce season being slow, late, and sort of having a late pickup. Some of the data that's come out from a company called Placer, AI, Placer.ai, they track the movement of people through cell phones anonymously. They track our movement at restaurants, Home Depot, Lowe's, all sorts of places. They do location tracking. And nice. It looks like that traffic is not getting worse at these locations. It looks like that there's some increase from April to May in the number of people visiting malls, superstores, grocery stores. But what's happening is the number of visits is decreasing, but the time of the visit and the spend is increasing. So people are going less, but they're spending more. It's a more.
So they kind of know what they want. They go in and get it and leave, kind of thing.
Exactly.
As opposed to just perusing.
Exactly. So that's an interesting trend from a sales point of view, because if you go to malls, you see the traffic not there necessarily like it used to be. The other data point that I'm really encouraged by from a truckload carrier perspective is Home Depot Lowe's foot traffic. It's perking up. It looks like, and I'll read the text, between the end of April and the end of May, the year-over-year visit gaps, so this is how many visits people make to the stores, has narrowed. So when you look at the year-over-year, in April, the year-over-year visits at Home Depot were down 17% last year. Sorry, in April. At the end of May, down to 6%. So we're getting more traffic. Home Depot, Lowe's, 18% in April, behind last year, only 6% behind in May this year. So we're seeing week over week visits are turning positive, which could mean that sector is perking up and that this year's home improvement may still come. Home improvement boom, because home improvement, remember on our show we had Dustin Gilbert from Fast Markets talking about the home building market. New homes is part of the equation for demand, but home renovations is about 40% of the demand for lumber. Right, and so that's why Lowe's and Home Depot are important, because truckloads of nails and guns and nail guns and saws and wheelbarrows and all that stuff has got to be delivered. Every time I go to Lowe's and Home Depot, it's hard to get into the car park because of pallets of bags of wood chips and mulch that are kind of stacked up outside. So lots of freight has already moved, but I'm encouraged by some of those signs that some of the consumer numbers are starting to look a little bit more positive on the ground. as we hear signs of sort of inflation and easing and not nearly as bad as it was this time last year. So it's still flat. The market is still flat from a truckload demand perspective. There are still carriers exiting the industry. If I was to go out on a limb, you could almost suggest that if rates have bottomed and they're not sort of continuing to decline, that supply and demand are kind of reaching that equilibrium point in the spot market. For the best part of this year, we've had more trucks than loads by a long way. That's kind of starting to get closer to where it needs to be for the market to bottom out. So we're still in this sort of holding pattern. It'll still be a tough grind over the summer for carriers, but that's where we're at. I think the takeaway this week from our data is a fourth week of data kind of suggesting that we're at the bottom of the market, in the spot market in particular. Contract rates still coming down though.
Well, I can tell you just from personal, I've been at Home Depot more this year than I have probably in the last couple of years. I think so. A lot of it is I wait for the specials to come out on Thursday and see what it was. So one thing that brought me to Home Depot last week, where I wouldn't normally have gone, was the dirt, like the garden soil. They were like 96 cents plus tax or something per bag. And normally I would go up to the top of town and get a yard of dirt dumped in the back of my truck. And then you got to shovel it out, shovel it into the trailer, and then shovel it from the trailer to top seed your grass. And it worked out to be about 1.25 yards for the same price. And it's in bags, so it's easily moved and transported without having to shovel twice. So for us, we're looking at that. We're looking at the black mulch. They had big specials on black mulch. So we went and got a ton of that. Whereas last year it was lumber. So it's different areas of the overall home improvement I'm noticing for myself anyways. And I look at my neighbors and kind of what they're doing, and I'm seeing the same thing. Like during COVID, it was a lot of people were doing renovations, and a lot of people were doing internal stuff and external stuff. I mean, I know the fences that I built and the cabanas I built and all that during COVID to kind of create that backdoor oasis. Now it's kind of the finishing of it. So it's interesting watching what people are walking out of Home Depot with. Like I do that a lot. I kind of sit there and I just watch, like, what is that cart leaving with? What is that cart leaving with? And you're right. I do notice that the traffic is up. Like the parking lot, they actually have you going in a different way now because of all the stock they have in there. And it's interesting. It'd be interesting. And then I was at a landscaping place for the last couple of days getting different kind of stone for the backyard. And I asked them, and the guy says, we're busier than we've ever been. It's like everybody has just decided to do the outdoor of their house. He goes, it's crazy. Like we don't have enough employees. We can't find enough people.
Yeah, and you got to ask yourself too, even when you're getting jobs priced last year by other companies, some people are doing it yourself at this point, right? So, that's probably another reason as to why, because the prices have increased, doubled and tripled. So people rather do it themselves.
That's if you can find, laborers. I'm one of those people, Tyler, where I'm installing a new exterior door at our house, and I've had to finish off the renovation because our builders kind of abandoned us. Around Christmas time. So I've been forced to, but given the choice, I would rather have found a replacement. But to get someone to come in immediately and pick up where someone else left off with some pretty crappy work, it's really hard to do. So I'm one of those people.
Especially if you're halfway through or something, because they don't want to come in and clean up somebody else's mess and deal with it, right? Yeah. And another thing I'm noticing, and I don't know if you guys are and love your opinions on it, is the difference between eating at home and eating out. So Christine and I were away a couple of weeks ago, and we ate a beautiful halibut dinner, and it was like $44 per plate. And I mean, the piece of fish was thick and white. It was beautiful. And so it was like a really cool, like a Thai curry sauce with halibut and lentils and garlic beans. And so I tried to recreate it for dinner the other night. And I'll tell you, it was like the fish alone was close to $50 for 2 pieces. And then everything else, like it was close to $70. And so, you're talking, and so I'm starting to pay attention to all this kind of stuff, right? And then I looked at it and I said, you know what, for $14 extra plus tip, and then, you have a glass of wine. So there's, increased costs, but, you're paying $14 for the atmosphere. I'd pay that all day long. Like it's restaurants and home eating when you're eating well is almost coming to a medium, and it's kind of like the dirt, right? Even if I had to pay an extra $2 or $10, even $20 for a yard of dirt, the ease and being able to just grab the bags as opposed to shoveling it out of the truck and into the trailer and then from the trailer out, it's almost worth it to do that. Do you guys find that happening as well where you guys are?
Yeah, I think it's becoming reality because my wife and I made a Costco trip not even 2 days ago, and we came out with 4 bags with a bill of $247. Right? We went out for dinner.
Lucky. I call it
that was cheap. No, but it was 3 bags, right? That was cheap because we've experienced $500 bills, right? So for us now, we've gone out for dinner as cheap as $60, right? So especially. And it's easy with the daughter and whatnot. So we've evaluated it and we started thinking to ourselves, why are we buying in bulk like we are? Because really, in the end, we don't find ourselves saving money. It's just so high.
Yep.
It's interesting.
Yep, sure.
Yeah. So
yeah, you know what? I want to get back to the port and to what Dean was talking. Several months ago, Dean and I, we predicted that there was going to be a shift going from the West Coast into the Houston and East Coast markets several months ago as we were following the trends and what was going on. But let's pour some more salt on the wound, why don't we?
No, the props are coming out, boys. The props are coming out.
Okay, so here's the scoop on this, right? You got the Canadian ports going on strike on the 24th of it, which is huge. And a lot of people don't know that, but 15% of the container trade goes through that port in and out into the West Coast and into the U.S. market. 2% of the U.S. market goes to the West Coast ports. And right now, as Dean stated before about the ships sitting out there right now is $5.2 billion worth of freight for 86,381 TEUs. Huge. Okay. We're starting to get up into that, what we saw several months ago when, the disruptions were going. Well, guess what? Sikora is doing a great job because you just don't have the Canadian strike going on the 24th, but now you have a high probability of the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, the West Coast ports going on strike on the 20th. Right now, the Port of Oakland is operating at 58% productivity. Los Angeles is at 64% productivity, and Long Beach is at 62%. So you look at the disruptions and what the shippers have faced. We're going to see more. We're going to see more shifts. I can almost predict this that over the next couple of months, because I feel that shippers are really just at a boiling point right now. The other thing is that we're seeing those shifts happen, but as Dean mentioned, you've got the drought conditions of the Panama Canal, which is going to add 12 to 18 days of extra transit time on that. What else is going on? Oh, also forecasted for the rest of the year, 2023, starting in July, they're looking at a 10 to 20% decline in TEUs right at peak season. So we're going to have a really, really rough time in the back half of this year. It's going to affect everybody. There's so many disruptions that are going on out there. It's we're in for some really high waves right now.
Can we talk about these strikes for a second? Because I'd love your guys' opinion. I've noticed over the past decade or so that no strikes ever really happen. When we looked at the CNCP, when we looked at the rail lines in the US, with like all these huge corporations and huge unions and everything are like, we're gonna strike. And then just before it happens, somebody steps in and they either get what they want or they don't strike. And to me, I don't see it happening, because of the size of ports, the amount of money that's lost, the amount of money at stake, the amount of disruption in the economy that's at stake, sooner or later, a government entity is going to step in. Like I know Ontario stepped in. The government of Ontario stepped in when somebody was about to strike. And there was, labor unions with the teachers and all this kind of stuff. And the Ontario government stepped in and gave them what they want. Like we get so close, we get to right to that end. And then somebody steps in. And part of me says, obviously, as a union, and if they're unfair wages, whatever it is, they're going to get what they want in the end. It's just who can hold off longest. I don't see LA ports, West Coast ports, Canadian ports going on strike. I see something happening before the 24th to step in and give the Canadian team what they want. I see somebody stepping in, but I do see the disruption. Now, I know most of my clients, as soon as COVID hit, Dean and I have talked about this for almost 2 years now, we moved to Georgia. All of our freight goes to Georgia that used to go to California, because even when California is going steady, to get freight out of the port, to get trucks, to get everything, it's like this, it's the biggest roller coaster, I think, in the entire North American market right now is that area. And as a smart shipper, and I'm sorry if I'm calling out your shippers out there, go to a different port. Do it. And I have guys that have they said, you know what, I'm good. I've readjusted now. I'm additional 7 days now with the Panama Canal. It's obviously going to be longer, but an additional 7 days to get to Savannah over LA. And you know what? They've just their supply chain is just adjusted to it. So I'd love to hear your thought, all of your guys' thoughts, because this whole strike thing, we've lived through it how many times now? Like not just LA ports, but just in general, right? When BNSF was going to go on strike, and then the Railroad Association, and like all these different things were happening. Hell, I remember having dump trucks going down the 401 going on strike, saying we're not building anything. Remember that? Like we're not building anything. And within a day, the government stepped in and said, okay, back to work. And like, okay. And everybody goes back to work. And it's like, but it's a way for them to get what they want, as opposed to maybe just being logical in it and saying, okay, everybody, like Dean says, you got to leave something on the table for somebody else. So everybody get what they want. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, it does. And something, when you're talking about the Canadian possible strike, 99.6% of the union workers voted to have that happen. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't read a lot about what's going on with the Canadian, just the numbers and who voted and what a percent is. But I did hear that the U.S. government is in the works right now. They sent representatives out there to discuss with the labor union out there to try to avert this. Which does happen. But the thing is that when you look at the number of disruptions and how quickly they evolved over a very short period of time, shippers are perturbed, man. They're they're done with it, and that's why you've seen an uptick going to Houston. It's probably more than 24% now. You see that growth potential that's happening in the Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston area. You got now New Jersey, New York as the number one port, all because thanks to the West ports and what happened out there. I still feel, and Dean, I'd love to get your thoughts too. If we're going to continue to see those shifts, I believe it's going to happen. I don't think that the West Coast ports are going to recoup from this disaster again. I just don't see that happening.
No, I think they've certainly lost some traction. The labour talks were kind of delayed. It was July 1st last year when the current contract expired. We're almost up on a year where neither sides have had a contract. Patience is wearing thin. There's been a war of words. Everyone was really silent while volumes were way down. And it wasn't until volumes started to increase in April that talks started to ratchet up again. And because I was thinking that, you've kind of lost your leveraging power from a union perspective now that volumes are down substantially from this time last year when everybody was desperate to get their freight. So I think volumes are going to continue declining. There's no question about that. We will still see people ship freight into Los Angeles, even with the delays, and put it on a slow train to the east. That's always going to be a preferred strategy, whatever rates where they are today.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to get back to those numbers that we used to see.
No, and that's, if you could throw up that chart, Dan, I think this might answer Jeff's question. The orange line is where we are from a total monthly TEU perspective, and we're exactly where we were, within 25,000 containers of 2019 levels. So you can see that by the shape of the lines, exclude 2021 and 22, the blue and red, they're kind of the abnormal years. But you can see volumes kind of increase in March and April, taper off a bit in May, and two of the 3 years below it. And then they head into this peak season around August, September. So if you think back to one of those years, was it 2019 was the year, I may be missing a year here, but volumes were flat most of the year because the pull forward happened. I think this was 2021. The pull forward happened, if you look at that red, the pull forward happened very early in the year in June because people were worried about getting their inventory in time. And then volumes kind of declined all the way through year end. It could be that's where they are. When we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, have shippers, drawn down all of their bloated inventories they had from last year. It seems like it. So you would expect that we would see a normal increase in volume, vis-a-vis 2020 levels. Maybe that's a little bit too aggressive, but certainly increasing towards the peak season in September and then tailing off like they normally do. That's the big unknown right now, is whether those volumes will continue. I think one thing Jeff mentioned that is can't be ignored, and that's the supply chain disruptions that are going to occur.
Yes.
That's the good part is, though, that we don't have a shortage of chassis trailers, 53-foot dry boxes for intermodal moves. We have excess truckload capacity. We can be fairly nimble and agile and get this stuff moved pretty quickly. But you can see where, the shape of the orange, or the orange dots is Los Angeles, Long Beach. That's about a third this month of all the containers that come into the country still. You can see Houston, Savannah, Norfolk. Norfolk is the second red one on the right. That's the smaller one. And then you've got Philadelphia and Elizabeth, New Jersey. Yep. The other data point we didn't cover is that the shutdown in Seattle, although people are being a bit coy about whether it was shut down or not, 90% of Alaska's imports and freight come from the port of Seattle by a ship or barge. That's a probably bigger deal because the Canadian equivalent of the ILWU, I think it might even be the Canadian ILWU, is also talking about strike action this week, or some sort of, there's certainly a labour dispute going on there.
Yeah, and I enjoyed looking at that September on, Dean.
Yeah,
if you look at that September on in your chart, it's actually very interesting because you see 2022 was really the only year where there was not a peak in October for the Christmas rush. Yeah,
it was pulled forward. Right. That was it. You're right, Dad. It was last year. There was the big pull forward in June. Yeah, we kind of theorized that maybe this was just everybody getting ahead of the disruptions on the West Coast, which was starting to brew in about March of that year, if I recall.
And then I remember last year in April and May and June talking about the fact that there would be no October, November, December spike, that it was being the peak season moved back to July and August. And you look at how high that red spike is. That's you're like you can prophesize all this, Dean. You're all over it, brother. So guys, let's move to the second part of this conversation.
Yes.
How does data help build relationships? What's the correlation between data and relationships? And Dean, I'll start with you because I'll share with you a quick story. When I first met you, the data that you shared put clarity to so many issues I had in logistics at specific times. When you talked about accidents, when you talked about hours of service, when you talked about out of service hours, when you talked about all of these things that happen after holidays and after certain times of the year. And when you were talking about that at the TCA event, I remember sitting with friends of mine that own a trucking company and a brokerage, and they went, "Oh my God, I've never realized that." And so for me, that's where data really became the biggest part of sales for me and relationship building and sharing with customers data like what we have here. Hey, listen, FYI, here's a chart on the stats. We might want to pay attention to it. And here's the reasons why, and sharing that stuff with your customers. So Dean, if you could share with us, where you see that correlation, that intersection between data and relationships.
You probably heard me talk about, people say, what do I do? I kind of tell stories with data, but what we're really doing is building a jigsaw puzzle, because every data point is a piece on a puzzle, and no one piece gives you the complete picture. So one of the reasons I look at all of these things and rely on things like, counterintuitively, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, there's a lot of intelligence you can gather from people on the ground. I spend a lot of time in truck stops talking to drivers and dogs. And what I like to do is reality check what the data says, Dan. You can tell a story with data, but I like to make sure that it's grounded in reality and it makes sense based on what I hear. So to me, data is absolutely critical, because experientially driven decisions can be fundamentally flawed, because everybody brings bias to the table. And in the current world, because there's so much data available, what a veteran logistics person might think drives the market could have changed exponentially in just the last year. And that's why you've got to look at data, because when you go into businesses and you talk to people about relationships, the reason they're in their role is based on their knowledge and skill and experience. But if that experience is not based in, reality and data that's current, it can be off. And that's why you've always got to weigh information on your own scales. So I always look at everything pretty objectively. I look at what's happening on the road, what people are telling me, and then I go to the data and say, can I tell a story that maps to reality around that data? And that's how I think you build a partnership, because when I've ever worked on the trucking management side, I would always take data. I would go to a customer and say, hey, here's what's happening. Here's the data. Here's what the data shows us. Because you can always bet that the customer is always going to have someone there that's crunching numbers. If you're not, like you got to be as good, if not better, than what their data science people are.
I love that. Tyler, what do you think?
I think it's extremely important to have data on hand, because just with a few of my clients, I'll deal with resin producers, and then at the same time I deal with clients that specialize in plastic molding for tanks. And just there, you can foreshadow with conversations with resin producers if they're backlogged and inundated and overstocked, and then that the purchasing at that time is less. And then at the same time, you can use that to leverage your conversation with others. So you deal with suppliers, and then you deal with the purchasing managers. So when you're having conversations with the suppliers offhand with the raw materials, you're leveraging when you're actually having a conversation with the purchasers. And it helps tremendously, especially when you're getting to this season when people are having shutdowns, because I have one customer that is going to incur a shutdown in the next month, and my customer is a customer of that customer. So I said, hey, just want to foreshadow and let you know that there's going to be a shutdown for 4 weeks. How are you prepared for this? Well, we're going to have 10 truckloads in the next week, right? Because we need to ensure that we're overstocked when they're shut down. So it really does help when you're igniting a conversation with prospects, existing customers, and all that sort.
I love that.
Tyler, shutdown. What's the shutdown for? Is it like maintenance?
Yeah, so they're doing maintenance. Usually they repair flooring because they service the automotive sector as well. So, and yeah, that's why.
Plus, we have major construction shutdown in Ontario in August as well.
Really?
There's a big construction shutdown. I don't know. Is it across the U.S. too, guys, where they have a 2-week construction shutdown?
I didn't know. No.
So one of actually this shutdown that we're having, it's a sealant and adhesive supplier, but they are gonna, instead of doing 2-week shutdown, they're doing a 4-week shutdown. Now that's also a lack of support of workers, I think, as well. So they overstock themselves, and then at the same time they go through the shutdown of their inventory to prepare for a ramp up of Q3, right? So
yeah, okay. Okay, and that would be more like to help repaint the warehouse floor and all that kind of stuff like that, shut down, do inventory and all that. Yeah, there's a lot of companies that actually do that. I have a buddy that's in resin and epoxy, and he does floors like for FedEx and UPS and stuff. And he says you'd be amazed at how many companies shut down and just operate out of a third of their building, and nobody really knows they're shut down. But it's pretty cool. Jeff, what about you? How do you see data and relationships interacting?
Well, first of all, you have to have a good data source. I have a saying that I've said for many years. I believe in God. Everyone else brings data. You got to try. You've got to try to remove the emotional part of the decision making out of there. Two things come to mind. First, I'm going to bring in outside resource data, and then I'm going to use my customers' own data to possibly use it against them, because it's their data that's speaking about their business and how and what they're doing and when they do it. So when you combine that with your resources and taking data samples from what's happening and comparing it to them and how the supply chain is actually moving compared to how they think it's moving, it tells a story in and of itself. And it starts that conversation up, and that's what really builds it, because you're using their data. This is what you're showing me. Here's the reality of what's actually happening here. You're telling me your supply chain is this long. Well, guess what, guys? And then you use that, because really good data and really good data resources is going to help the business to move in a positive way forward. And that's what you're trying to do, especially like I'm sure everybody here has done QBRs, the quarter business reviews, and that is ideal. But when the market changes and it changes as quickly as it is, you want to have those conversations more frequently than waiting for the quarter to end. So, yeah, that's what I do.
I love that. Data for me has been probably one of the most important things to foster, grow, and build and maintain long-term relationships. I can tell you there's been millions of dollars lost and millions of dollars maintained just from data that I've shared with customers and with students and with companies I work with. One of the ones that rings out huge in my head was when we started talking when Houston port got drenched and bigger ships started coming in, and the rates going into Houston just plummeted like instantly. It was almost like within a 4-week period. And I remember, Dean, we were talking about it about 2 weeks before it happened, and we were saying, like, listen, here's the trajectory of what rates are doing over the last 2 weeks. In the next couple of weeks, rates are going to go down. And I remember speaking to a couple of students and customers of mine that I said, listen, your biggest customer is in Houston. They bring all the product to them. I said, you are going to have price wars in the next couple of weeks. The ones that acted on it maintained the business. The ones that didn't lost millions in business because they allowed somebody else to get through the door, and that person was able to, they're working with the market as opposed to saying, okay, well, here's my rate, and never paying attention to the market. And I think it's one of the worst things you can do as a sales rep is if you have a customer in any market, I don't care where they're going to or from, and if you don't understand what's coming down the line to the best of your ability in a month, 2 months, 3 months, the year over year, kind of what's trending, I think you're actually moving backwards, guys.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you're leaving that opportunity open for somebody else to come in. And I'm sorry to act like it's a war, but business is business. For somebody else to come in and give your customer better information to make a more educated decision as to what they want to do. And in the end, it's all about how good do we make our customers look. Every single customer we've had on here, how easy is it going to be to do business with you? If you're going to come to me and suggest things that make my business easier, create less ripples in the water, create less headaches, you're the person I'm going with. And you know what, Dean, Jeff, Tyler, we're not always right.
No.
But if we're right, I mean, hell, what are you going to do? Hit 3 out of 10 in baseball and you're in the Hall of Fame? Is it like 3 out of 10, right? So if you hit 4 or 5 out of 10 with your customer, you're golden. And like, don't be afraid to be wrong. How many times? I mean, majority of the time, Dean, you've said it right based on the data and making having an opinion, making an assumption of what's happening. And you know what? That overpowers the maybe in the year and a half we've been doing Data Day Wednesdays, maybe the 4 or 5 times you've been wrong. I don't even know when that is. I just know when you're right. And I think that's where we have to sit with our customers and that relation with data, because they trust us to be informed. Right now.
Well, you've got to be a student of the industry, right? You can't just sort of turn up and think, oh, I'll just wing it. Someone said yesterday, well, you make it look very easy. And I said, well, what you don't see is all the preparation. And trust me, it's not easy. I always get nervous when I come on a show and I screw up my lines, repeatedly. And
nobody knows, lucky, brother. Nobody knows.
Yeah, nobody knows. But
we're very lucky. We're very lucky. We're just very lucky the Australian truck driver hasn't turned up and cancelled us all. You have no idea how lucky we are.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things in building relationships is having the ability to tell your customer when they're wrong.
Right.
Tell them the things that they want to hear, and definitely the things that they don't want to hear. Yeah. And the best results come when you're saying they're wrong using their own data. That's huge. That is absolutely huge. When you do the deep dive and you pull out those little golden nuggets that they never thought of, that's gold. That's what gives you a seat at the oak table and gets you involved deep within that client. And so don't be afraid to say something.
Yeah.
If it's wrong, identify it. Tell them that it's wrong. And that's going to really solidify a relationship for sure. Absolutely.
For sure. Build a lot of respect. My first consulting job was, the analogy, don't sugarcoat the bitter pill. My first consulting job in this country in 2000 was a trucking company that was uninsurable. Had just buried 3 drivers in 3 months, had a massive fatigue problem, sleep deprivation, 24/7 hazmat tanker company. And the insurance company said, we met them at Harvard Business School restaurant, cafeteria, whatever it was, and said, can you come down and have a look at this fleet? We don't know what's wrong. We think it's got a driver's got a low speed backing problem. And I'm thinking, dude, you just buried 3 drivers. Probably not a low speed backing problem. Anyway, I've been off the road a few times as a driver. I kind of knew what was already happening. So I sat there and I did my whole week, Jeff, and I sat down in the boardroom and I said, I can't tell you any other way than what I think is really going on here, and you're not going to like it. You're going to think I'm nuts. And I said, 10% of your revenue is killing your business and a few of your drivers, and they are your oldest customers, and you have to get rid of them. And they all went, whoa, what do you mean? I said, well, your business model is driving your safety model the wrong direction, and your business model is the customer's always right. And in a lot of cases, the customer isn't always right if their business doesn't fit your safety model. That doesn't mean you make less profits. It just means you're a much smarter business. So long story short, we made some changes. They jettisoned some of their older customers because what the older customers did is they played on their long-term relationship to change their loads and dispatch more often than everyone else. And what was happening at about midnight, about half of their day's dispatch was completely changed. And it was screwing up all of the schedules for the drivers, and drivers love predictability. And I remember going with data to one of the biggest oil companies in the country, and I said, we can't do this run under 12 and a half hours. We can't do it. We have to change something. We have to change the load time and the drop time. We needed to get it at 12 hours because it was a short haul run. But we need to change some things. And they said, what do you need? And they accommodated us. And we were able to get rid of the risk out of the business by the customer. But we had to show them the data. And the data was an alertness curve plot based on the ELD data feed that showed at the point of delivery how tired the driver was. And we said the problem is not when he's unloading, because even though there's an elevated chance of a mix and spill in the tanks, it's on the way back, where the driver's on his own and relaxes because the load's delivered. That's when we're exposed. So never sugarcoat the bitter pill. Customers will respect you
Absolutely.
forever if you tell them the right thing and convince them with data.
Yep. Don't
You
be
know,
afraid
there's
to-
also a second part of that. Data and all the data that you have can sometimes be in person. So when we started moving Dell Computer, we kept telling Dell we're missing delivery times because of the time we leave in Nashville, Tennessee. And I remember the guy from Austin, Texas was like, not a chance. It's this many miles. And I said, no, but you don't understand. We're hitting the 401 at this time, which puts us in traffic for this long. And we showed him satellite like travel and everything. And we gave him access to our satellite and everything. And he's like, why is the truck gone 4 kilometers in 2 hours? Right. And just didn't get it. And so we said, okay, we gave them all the data we could have amassed at that time. And then the only thing left was for them to see it in person. And they all of a sudden the computation started working. So we actually flew them in at 5 o'clock for a plane that landed at 5 o'clock from Texas. And we came out of Pearson Airport in the gridlock traffic, 5:45. And our office was a 3-minute drive, like exit 427, get off at Dixie and at Britannia and Dixie. So you're literally like one exit from the 427. It took us an hour and 20 minutes to get back to the office. And I remember we were about 35 minutes in traffic. He goes, okay, so I'm not sure if you guys were trying to make a point, but if you were, point given. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. Dell Computer actually upped production to get us out of there 4 hours earlier. And then all of a sudden it was like clockwork. We started hitting the travel time every single time because we beat that 4 hours. Like how many of us, when we didn't work at home, it was like a 15-minute window. And then you're either really stuck in traffic or you're smooth sailing on either side of that 15. Tyler, you know what I'm talking about, where we used to work, right?
Yeah.
So it's like sometimes that data needs to be in person. So don't be afraid to bring your customer to your fulfillment center. Don't be afraid if you're doing the third-party warehouse from. Bring them to the warehouse right when they're dropping orders and show them what it looks like when an order drops at 4:30 to get it out the door. People are frantic, they're rushing, as opposed to saying, okay, cutoff is 2 p.m. Because this is a big one in our industry, right, guys? Right. Salespeople are afraid to say, well, cutoff. No, 4:30. Okay, I'll get it done. And then things are picked incorrectly. Skids aren't wrapped properly. There's all these things that happen when we try and rush. And I know the most of it, like we were talking to Rico last week, it's the hurry up and wait scenario, right? Where he's like, they needed me here and he's got the red light on for 4 hours. So he's like, hell, I'll come on a podcast for an hour and a half. I could talk, you know what I mean? And so it's like this hurry up and wait, but just for everyone watching, that data is so important. And if the customer the customer might need to see it to believe it. And that's a reality of it. So don't be afraid to bring them to the port. Don't be afraid to bring them to your carrier's yard. Like I'm going all the way here and saying, like, listen, here's what happens when you try and get us to at 4:30, you drop an order, it needs to be picked up by 6. Here's the route. Let's drive it at 4:30 and we'll see what it is. And show them that data that they might not otherwise understand. Like how many times you guys have all been to California? Yep. The traffic down there is insane. We see pictures of California. I see 5-tier highways. I'm like, how could the traffic be insane? You guys have more highways than we have up here. But unless you're in it, you don't really get it, right? So you got to pick up an LTL pickup in LA somewhere, and it's 3 o'clock. The reality is that driver probably won't make it that day. Let's be realistic, and let's get ahead of it. So let's use that data to help our customers make better choices.
And
I think that's...
Dan, to end it on that would be sometimes you're gonna as a salesperson you're gonna get some pushback on their own data. So what you really need to do is to say, listen, it's imperative that I use your own data so I can show you the problems that you have in it. I'll sign an NDA. I'm not going to share your information with anybody else between you and me. And I'll get that back in a certain time frame because they don't like that data being exposed for a long period of time. So don't be afraid to ask for an NDA and if they would be willing to do that and how critical it is to use their own data for them and against them.
Yep. Tyler, what were you going to say there, brother?
Well, I was just going to go off of what Dean was saying and the same thing that you went off of, Dan. Sometimes you might receive even from clients an existing SOP, but there was failures that they incurred. And once you're operating under that SOP for a few weeks after testing it, that's when you turn yourself into a salesperson and into a professional, because you've evaluated it. You've seen that there's some inefficiencies that you can unearth with your operating procedure and recommend that, hey, we were doing it this way. I recommend that we do it this way so we don't incur this failure moving forward, right? And then that's when you can have those conversations in relation to data, because now they're looking at you as a professional where they go, hey, you fixed this failure that we were incurring. What are your thoughts with X, right? And it's a really great way to do it. And I love this conversation. It was tremendous, and I appreciate you guys inviting me to this.
Oh, pleasure. You know, Tyler, if I could say one thing, and it's from my heart, brother, you've really become a professional in this industry. I watched you walk in day one, green as green can be, sitting in my office, us having conversations. My brother, you've flourished and you've become a true professional and an asset to your company. So good for you, buddy. Good.
Thank you. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Jeff, thank you for being here again, brother. Man, you bring such great value to the conversation. And Dean, my man, always some of my favorite times, and we'll connect with everybody after. Until next week, use the data, my friends. Reach out. Don't be afraid. We all got DMs on LinkedIn. Maybe don't DM Dean because he's really busy. And last time I said that, I think Dean got like 19 requests for information. Last time I said, yeah, just DM Dean. He'll give you what you need.
Yeah,
Dean
my
like,
email. Here's his phone number. No, just kidding.
Yeah. Hold on. Anybody just text me and I'll send you Dean's contact info. Dean, before I go, quick shout out. Anybody got anything going on they want to share and share with the audience?
Yeah, I do. We've got Chris Henry from Canada, KSM Advisors. Chris Henry.
He's awesome.
I love Chris Henry. He's on our show next Tuesday.
Sweet.
Yeah, I won't be there, but he'll be there with Alex Perry and Ken Adamo. So that'll be a good show. He's going to be talking about what they're seeing in the truckload carrier market, both contract and spot. Cross-border also, because KSM do a lot of consulting work in the US, but primarily Chris is there to run the Canadian operation. It should be a good discussion.
Well, it was actually Chris Henry and we were having a conversation which brought me to the TCA, so where I met you.
Yes.
So, I mean, you know what I mean? It's a small world, brother. It's a small world.
Yeah.
Jeff, you got anything going on? Tyler, you got some camera issues going on there, or what's happening? You trying to get a close-up? Let me get my close-up before the show ends. Jeff, what do you got going on, buddy?
Yeah, I got a good guest on the Storytelling Chronicles this Monday coming up. Actually, it's Tuesday. Sorry about that. On the 20th. 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I have Mitz Kowalewski, Senior Vice President of Amplify Logistics. We're going to talk a little bit about cold chain and produce. So it should be a good conversation. Again, it's all about the lessons and what we've learned from working in the logistics industry. And it's going to be a good show. So enjoy it.
Good one.
Awesome. Tyler, what do you got going on there, buddy?
I think at the start of July I'll be making a trip to Texas to visit some customers. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, just make the rounds throughout the U.S. To say hello. So that's what's on the go right now. Is just maintaining the existing business that we do have to see good orders in Q3 at the end of Q3 and Q4 here. So I muted myself because my daughter's back. So
yeah, there we go. No, that's okay. We're off anyways. Everybody, if you enjoyed this show, and I'm sure you did, and if you understand the importance of data, which I really, really hope you do, share it with somebody that you think can use it. Share it with some of your colleagues, teammates. As Ryan says, hell, share it with the UPS driver or the Amazon driver that's coming today, because y'all know you ordered those packages. And share it with your contractors that stop showing up, and understanding how data of contractors not showing up can actually help you build a relationship with a contractor, Dean. And to Dean, if we don't talk to you before next week, my friend, good luck on the knee surgery. And will we see you next week on the show, Dean? Are you on back on next Wednesday? Or
I should be on Wednesday, but if you could hang around after the show, I'd love to have a quick chat about timing.
1,000%. Take care, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. Brian and I bring in our 2 clips for Mindset Thursdays. Have a good one.
Have a great day, guys.